For 14 months, I had helped my son and daughter-in-law whenever they needed me. But one Friday night, Laurel stopped asking and started giving orders. That was the moment I decided she was about to learn the difference between kindness and obedience. The wall clock in my small kitchen showed 9:15 when my phone buzzed on the counter. I had just packed my tote bag for a Saturday morning pottery class at the community center down in town. When I picked up, there was no warm greeting or asking about my evening. Laurel spoke quickly, her voice sharp, and hurried over the speaker. She told me I needed to be at their house by 8 sharp tomorrow because she had booked an all-day wellness retreat with her co-workers. For the past 14 months since my husband passed and I retired from 30 years of managing a local bakery, my weekends had quietly disappeared. Every single Friday brought a similar assignment disguised as family loyalty. Whenever I hesitated, Laurel made sure to remind me that retired life meant my calendar belonged to whoever needed help the most. My son Vaughn usually stood nearby during those calls, adding gentle nods in the background to avoid any tension in his marriage. I looked at my class registration receipt sitting next to my mug of chamomile tea. I had paid $40 for the 6-week ceramic course, something I had postponed for nearly half a year. I told her calmly that I had plans in the morning and could not make the 30-minute drive across the county. Laurel paused, clearly surprised by the pushback, before letting out a short, irritated breath. She said that hobbies could wait when family responsibilities were on the line. Instead of arguing or apologizing, I simply told her that tomorrow would not work. Her tone shifted into sheer annoyance as she demanded to know who else would watch 4-year-old Toby on such short notice. I suggested she check with a local babysitter from the neighborhood agency. She told me that hiring someone was a waste of money when I was sitting alone at home. On Monday morning, I drove over to their suburban 2-story house to drop off a tin of freshly baked oatmeal muffins. When Laurel opened the door with her work tote over her shoulder, she barely glanced at the container in my hands. She left the front door open, walked back toward the kitchen island, and pointed toward the chalkboard calendar hung beside the pantry. Without turning around, she remarked that my absence on Saturday had forced Vaughn to reschedule an overtime shift at the logistics firm. I placed the tin on the counter and looked at the board. My name was already written across 3 weekday mornings in bold black marker alongside specific pickup times from Toby's morning preschool. Nobody had asked if my schedule allowed it. Over the past year, Laurel had systematically organized her work weeks around my unpaid labor, treating my retired status as an open-ended company resource. If I arrived 5 minutes late due to road construction, she would leave the front porch with a pointed tap on her wristwatch. Vaughn walked down the stairs, adjusting his tie, looking tired and uneasy. He glanced between his wife and me, offering a quiet greeting before grabbing his travel mug. When I mentioned that I was thinking about volunteering at the botanical gardens on Wednesday mornings, Laurel immediately cut in. She explained that private daycare costs had risen to $1,800 a month, so personal hobbies needed to take a back seat until Toby entered kindergarten full-time next autumn. Vaughn did not challenge her statement. He simply kissed Toby on the forehead and hurried out towards the garage. Laurel handed me Toby's lunchbox, listed 3 specific rules about limiting his screen time to educational programs only, and grabbed her keys. As she stepped out, she told me to make sure the laundry in the basement dryer was folded before noon. Instead of folding their laundry that Tuesday morning, I sat on the living room rug with Toby and built a tall wooden bridge out of his building blocks. When he asked for a mid-morning snack, I sliced up the apples I had brought from my own kitchen rather than opening the expensive organic pouches Laurel kept under lock in the upper cabinet. I enjoyed my grandson's bright laughter, but I no longer felt the urge to act as their unpaid housekeeper while he played safely. At exactly 11 o'clock, I packed my purse, put Toby's light jacket on him, and drove him to his scheduled preschool session. After signing him into the classroom, I walked straight back to my sedan instead of heading to their house to clean up the breakfast dishes. I drove over to the community center, paid my full registration fee for the remaining pottery sessions, and signed up for an afternoon floral arrangement workshop that met every single Thursday. When Laurel called me at 4 that afternoon, her voice carried a distinct edge of frustration. She had returned home from her office expecting to find the kitchen counters wiped down and the folded laundry placed neatly on the master bed. When she asked why the baskets were still sitting in the utility room, I answered evenly that my role was to care for Toby, not manage household chores. She was silent for several seconds before responding with a forced, dismissive chuckle. She told me that families helped each other without drawing silly lines over basic housework. She insisted that since I was already inside the house running a few loads of towels was the least I could do to show support. I did not raise my voice or justify my afternoon schedule. I simply reminded her that I would see Toby on Thursday morning for his usual school drop-off. On Thursday, while waiting in the preschool lobby to pick up Toby, I ran into Martha, a woman who lived 2 houses down from Vaughn and Laurel. Martha greeted me with a warm smile and asked how my recent trip to the coast had been. I looked at her with genuine confusion, explaining that I had not visited the coast in over 5 years. Martha tilted her head, clearly surprised, and mentioned that Laurel had spoken about it at the neighborhood association meeting last weekend. According to Martha, Laurel had told several neighbors that I stayed with them constantly because I had no other social life and relied on their busy household for company and purpose. She had framed my 30 hours of weekly babysitting as a charitable favor they provided to keep an aging widow from feeling isolated in her quiet bungalow. Standing under the fluorescent lights of the school hallway, the pieces of Laurel's behavior over the past year finally fell into sharp, unmistakable focus. My time, my energy, and my quiet willingness to help had not been received with gratitude. They had been rewritten as an act of pity. When Toby ran toward me with a colorful finger painting in his hands, I hugged him tightly, took his small backpack, and walked out to the parking lot with a clear mind. That afternoon, while Toby napped on my living room sofa after lunch, I sat at my dining table and reviewed my personal calendar alongside my monthly bank statements. I had spent hundreds of dollars on gas, groceries, and children's supplies over the last year without ever asking for a dime in reimbursement. I had allowed my own routines, friendships, and peaceful retirement to be squeezed into whatever narrow gaps Laurel left open for me. When Vaughn stopped by my house at 5 to pick up his son, I watched him carefully as he stood in my entryway. Vaughn stood near the coat rack checking work emails on his smartphone while Toby put on his sneakers. Without looking up from his screen, he casually mentioned that Laurel was organizing a dinner party for her regional marketing team next Friday evening. He asked if I could come over around 5 feed. Toby dinner put him to bed, and stay overnight so they could entertain their guests without having to worry about morning wake-up duties. I handed Toby his small water bottle and looked directly at my son. I told him that I would not be available for an overnight stay next Friday. Vaughn paused, lowering his phone with a puzzled look that showed how rarely he ever heard me decline a family request. He asked what plans I could possibly have on a Friday night, his tone echoing the same mild presumption his wife used so naturally every week. I told him calmly that my Friday evenings were reserved for my own home, my reading, and my rest. Vaughn rubbed the back of his neck, his shoulders slumping as he sighed. He told me that Laurel was under an immense amount of pressure to impress her new department director, and having family cover the childcare made their household run smoothly. He added that hiring an outside sitter would cost them over $100 that they preferred not to spend. I reminded him that they both earned solid salaries and that managing their social obligations was entirely up to them as parents. Vaughn looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from one foot to the other before muttering that Laurel would be extremely stressed if she had to change her plans. I did not offer a compromise or soften the boundary with an apology. I simply wished them a safe drive home and closed my front door firmly behind them as they walked toward their car. Over the following week, I deliberately expanded my daily routine so that my hours were no longer open for last-minute requests. I committed to 3 morning shifts a week at the town library, organizing the children's reading corner and cataloging incoming donations. The quiet structure of the library, surrounded by friendly colleagues and purposeful tasks, restored the sense of autonomy I had slowly lost after my husband died. I also joined a Tuesday evening walking group that met at the county park. We walked 3 miles along the paved trails, talking about gardening, local history, and upcoming community events. For the first time in over a year, my days were filled with conversations that did not revolve around Laurel's work schedule, Toby's strict dietary guidelines, or Vaughn's endless logistical headaches. I felt lighter, more energized, and completely in charge of my own time. On Wednesday afternoon, Laurel sent a group text message to Vaughn and me with a screenshot of an upcoming corporate convention schedule. She typed a short note stating that she needed me to cover 4 full days from 8 in the morning until 6 in the evening during the 3rd week of the month. The message contained no question mark, no polite inquiry about my availability, and no acknowledgement of the massive time commitment she was demanding. I waited 2 hours before replying to the group thread. In a short, polite message, I stated that I was committed to my volunteer schedule at the library and could only assist with preschool pickup on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons between 2 and 4. Within 10 minutes, my phone rang with an incoming call from Laurel. I chose not to answer it while I was preparing my dinner, letting the call roll quietly into voicemail. When Laurel realized I was not responding to her urgent text messages, she drove over to my house on Thursday morning before her work shift began. I was out on my front porch, watering the potted ferns hanging from the eaves, when her white SUV pulled sharply into my driveway. She stepped out with her sunglasses pushed up on her head, holding a printed planner in one hand and her car keys in the other. She walked up the porch steps without greeting me and asked why I had not picked up her call the previous evening. She pointed out that her corporate convention was crucial for her upcoming annual performance review and that family members were supposed to step up during important career milestones. Her tone was firm, seasoned, with the practiced authority she used when managing junior staff at her marketing firm. I placed my watering can on the small wooden side table and invited her to sit down on the porch chairs. She remained standing, crossing her arms, and stating that she did not have time for a lengthy chat before her morning meetings. She said she needed a firm confirmation that I would be at their house for the full 4 days so she could finalize her travel schedule. She added that relying on daycare drop-in spots was far too chaotic for Toby. I looked her in the eyes and repeated what I had written in my text message. I told her I was happy to help for 2 hours on Tuesday and Thursday, but the rest of the week belonged to my prior commitments. Laurel's expression hardened, her jaw tightening as she realized I was not going to yield under her stare. She told me that if I refused to support them when they needed it most, I was actively creating unnecessary conflict within the family. That Friday evening, the pressure reached its peak. I had just finished drying my dinner dishes and was sitting in my armchair with a new mystery novel when my phone rang. The caller ID displayed Laurel's name. When I answered, she did not bother with pleasantries or subtle persuasion. She spoke with cold, calculated finality, informing me that she and Vaughn were leaving early the next morning for an all-day seminar in the city. She ordered me to be at her house by 8 in the morning, adding that Toby's breakfast would be prepped in the refrigerator. When I took a breath to speak, she cut me off, her voice rising in irritation. She told me that I would babysit because she said so, claiming that as Toby's mother, she made the decisions regarding who cared for him and when. The sheer entitlement in her voice hung heavily in the air between us. I stayed completely still, feeling no anger, only absolute clarity. I spoke in a steady, measured voice that left no room for misunderstanding. I told her that she had the authority to make decisions for her child, but she had zero authority over my life, my time, or my home. I told her that my answer was no, and that if she needed weekend childcare, she would have to pay a licensed provider like every other working parent in our town. The complete silence on the other end of the line was deafening. The silence told me she had never genuinely expected me to stop being her free, on-demand babysitter. For several seconds, only the faint static of the cellular connection filled the receiver. When she finally tried to stammer out a response, her commanding tone was entirely gone, replaced by sudden shock. I wished her a good evening, ended the call, and set my phone on silent. On Saturday morning, I woke up early, brewed a fresh pot of dark roast coffee, and enjoyed a quiet breakfast on my back patio while listening to the birds in the maple trees. At 20 past 8, my driveway remained empty, confirming that Laurel had finally realized her commands no longer carried any weight in my household. I packed my pottery tools into my tote bag and drove to the community center for my scheduled morning class. During the class, I focused entirely on shaping a clay bowl on the spinning wheel, feeling the steady rhythm of the clay beneath my hands. When I checked my phone around noon, I saw 2 missed calls from Vaughn and 1 text message. The message was from my son explaining that they had ended up paying a local college student $30 an hour to watch Toby so they could attend their seminar on time. He wrote that the sudden expense had caused an argument between him and Laurel before they left the house. When I called Vaughn back from my car in the parking lot, his voice was subdued and weary. He tried to tell me that I had put them in a difficult financial position on very short notice. I listened patiently before reminding him that emergency planning was part of running an adult household. I told him that I loved Toby dearly and would always cherish spending quality time with him, but that our time together would happen through mutual respect and proper planning, not last-minute demands. Vaughn was quiet for a long moment before admitting that they had grown accustomed to taking my presence for granted. For the first time in years, he did not defend Laurel's harsh approach. He simply acknowledged that things had to change between us moving forward. 3 months have passed since that Friday night phone call, and the rhythm of my life has settled into a peaceful, healthy balance. I still volunteer at the town library 3 mornings a week, and my finished pottery bowls now sit on my dining room sideboard, holding fresh fruit and dried flowers. My calendar belongs entirely to me, filled with activities, friendships, and quiet evenings that bring genuine joy to my retired years. My relationship with my son's household has fundamentally changed for the better. Laurel enrolled Toby in an afternoon enrichment program 3 days a week and established an account with a trusted local babysitting service for their weekend social events. Because they now pay market rates for their childcare, they treat every hour with careful planning and budgeting, rather than assuming family labor is an endless free commodity that comes without cost. I now see Toby every Sunday afternoon from 1 until 4. I pick him up, take him to the local playground, read stories at the public library, or bake cookies together in my sunny kitchen. When I bring him home, Laurel greets me at the front door with a polite smile, offering a genuine word of thanks as she takes his jacket. There are no more chalkboards assigning my days, no more demands left on my voicemail, and no more chores left for me to finish. Setting a firm boundary did not break my family apart. It simply required them to see me as an independent individual with a life of my own. As I drove home last Sunday after watching Toby wave goodbye from their front porch, I felt a deep, enduring sense of peace. Love within a family flourishes only when respect is mutual, and finding the courage to say no had finally given all of us the room to build something real.